And without further ado, I would like to present to you guys the next President of the United States, Andrew Yang.
I felt like Heidi was just getting started. What happened there? I thought Heidi was just getting to the good part. Good morning. How are you all? Happy Saturday. Happy New Year, yeah. Love. If you don't celebrate Chinese New Year, don't know what I'm talking about, it's cool. All you should do is just get yourself something to eat that you like, and then just say Happy Chinese New Year and then eat it. And that'll be very fitting. for the next 2 weeks, it's true. I love campaigning here in Iowa because you all have so much power to shape the future of our country. You're among the most influential people in our country today. I know it does not feel like that. You're just living your lives, decide to come to the local presidential campaign event. But I've done the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000 Californians each. So look around this space today. How many of us are there? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 800 people here today. It's the biggest gathering anyone's ever seen. I think there are about 50 or 60 people here today, which would still be more than one football stadium worth of Californians. That is the power you all have. That's why I'm so excited to be here, because of what you can do on February 3rd. Now, most of you know I'm not a career politician. Raise your hand if you've seen TV ads with my face on it. Let's try that. That's very good because we spent a lot of money on those ads, and it would be very, very disappointing if you hadn't seen them. So you know I'm not a career politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver, and I'm trying to address this challenge that we've been grappling with for the last several years that still has confused many of our fellow Americans. And that question, that challenge is this: why is Donald Trump our president today? How did Donald Trump win Iowa, the purplest of swing states, by almost 10 points? Now, if you turned on cable news at any point between Trump's victory and today, why would you think that he won? Russia? Hillary Clinton and emails? Racism? Facebook? Bigotry? FBI? Electoral college? All sort of mixed together into some kind of strange potpourri. But Oskaloosa, I'm a numbers guy, and the numbers tell a very clear and distinct story as to why Donald Trump is our president today. And this is a story that many of you will find familiar. We eliminated 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years in this country. And where were those jobs located? Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. I have been to those towns in Iowa after the manufacturing jobs dried up. And then the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that community has never recovered. I saw the same pattern play out in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, because before running for president, I ran a nonprofit for 7 years that helped create thousands of jobs in those places. And what happened to the manufacturing towns here in Iowa happened there too. Unfortunately, what happened to those manufacturing jobs is now shifting to other parts of our economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live in this part of Iowa? And this gentleman looks around, is laughing, and is like looking around the mall. Is it true that JCPenney just closed? Is that accurate? And that's a big deal, because when you have an anchor store in a mall like this and it closes, that's very, very negative for the health of the mall. And you know that these malls can go from being these centers of commerce and activity to kind of spooky, like if it becomes too empty. I'm 45 years old. I grew up in the 80s. I loved my local mall. It was like the center of my universe growing up. Anytime my parents brought me to the mall, I was like, yes! Then you'd run around. For some reason, I enjoyed going to the CVS in my mall. Does that make any sense? I don't know, man, you're like 13 years old and you go in there and you're like, what kind of, I don't know what I was shopping for. I don't know. But I loved my local mall. To me, the mall was the center of the universe. But not just this mall, but 30% of Iowa's, 30% of America's malls are closing as we speak. And why is that happening? Amazon, that's right. So you might think Walmart's like a tank that came to town and started running over mom and pop retailers. Amazon's more like a spaceship. It like hovers over the whole thing and sucks up $20 billion in value every single year. Most common job in our economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next opportunity when the store that employs her closes? That's a rhetorical question. No one really knows. How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? 0. Many of you might not have known that. But that is your math, Oskaloosa. 20 billion out, 30% of stores close, you get 0 back. And it's not just the changes you can see. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the software bot on the other end, you probably do the same thing I do. Which is you pound 000, say human, human, representative, human, 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 until you eventually get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that, because that software is miserable. We're all like, this company employs a human somewhere, and I'm now going to find them. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hello, Andrew, how are you? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, efficient. You might not even know it's software. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making between $10 and $14 an hour? How many of you all know a truck driver here in Iowa? It's the most common job in 29 states. Oh, he raised his hand. Nice job. Like the only one in his family who knows truck driver. Good. I know what the It's the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truckers in our country. 94% men, average age 49. My friends in California are now working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say they are 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you will see the story. And then at the end of the route was a giant stack of pancakes, as far as the eye can see. No, I'm kidding about the pancakes, but everything else is real. How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? They say that 5,000 people stop there every day. They've got a really excellent buffet. How many people will stop there when the trucks no longer have drivers? Iowa has been ground zero for many of the changes that are now sweeping our economy. It started on your farms with the consolidation and mechanization of many agricultural jobs. Then it hit your factories, wiping out tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs. Now it's on your main streets as Amazon sucks you dry and pays 0 in taxes. We have to stop it before it hits your highways. So this is what I was unpacking in 2016. Donald Trump wins, and I say, wow, tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star. That is a very, very big red flag. The feedback mechanism between us and our government is breaking down. And I go through the numbers, find that we're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country. What experts are calling the 4th industrial revolution. When is the last time you've heard a politician say the words 4th industrial revolution? 3 seconds ago. And I'm barely a politician. Really, my wife, who's not with me physically right now, but she's like in Iowa City with the boys, she can vouch for the fact that I never intended to run for president, and that if she had any hint I was going to run for president when we were dating, she would have run the other direction. But in 2017, I unpacked all these facts and figures, and then I went to our leaders in DC and said, what are we going to do to help our people manage this economic transformation that's now pushing more and more of us to the side? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I said, what are we going to do? Put your DC hat on. What did they say to me? So I got nothing over here. What's in it for me? At another event, someone made the Scooby-Doo noise. It was like, ooh, oh. The big answers I got out of DC were these. Number 1, we cannot talk about this. Number 2, we should study this further. And number 3, this will be familiar, I believe. We must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you have heard that in some form? Oh yeah, that sounds okay, but I'm the numbers guy. Do you all want to guess what the studies show as the effectiveness rate of government-funded retraining programs for manufacturing workers who lost their jobs? You know it's low because I'm anchoring you low. But you also know it's low because you know human beings. You know if hundreds of manufacturing workers lose their jobs, they don't all march out and say, I'm here for my coding training program. Like, I've been waiting for this. The success rates were 0 to 15%. Almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest left the workforce and did not work again. You then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities as almost half filed for disability. And it's gotten so bad that now our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years in a row as a country because suicides and drug overdoses have each overtaken vehicle deaths for the first time in American history. You know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? World War II is a good guess. Great Depression's a good guess. It's the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic 100 years ago that killed millions. You have to go back that far because it's highly unusual for your life expectancy to ever decline in a developed country. It ordinarily goes up and up and up because you're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But in the US, it's gone down and then down and then down again. So I said this to the folks in DC, and one of them said something that brought me here to you all this morning. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this. Because fundamentally, this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years with the wave. So here we are 2 years later, Oskaloosa, and this last poll had me at 4th to be the Democratic nominee nationwide. We raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there was no corporate PAC money in there. It's all just people trying to take our government back to have it work for us again. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? No one really knows. But business is awfully good. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. We send them to D.C. They should be trying to do work on your behalf and then come home. They should not go to D.C. and be like, ooh, I like it here. Let me stay as long as possible. And I know how we're going to pass it. I'm going to be your president a year from now. I'm going to go to D.C. I'm going to go to our men and women in Congress and say, hey, we should have 12-year term limits, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that? Oh, yeah, they'll pass that. They'll be like, oh, we do this for the people. But they'll be exempt, so they'll walk around being like, hey, this doesn't apply to me. And then the next people come in, applies to them. But before you know it, the people that passed this will get phased out, and then we'll have a legislature that actually answers to us. The decision-making would improve so much. The fact is, you have a different stance if you're trying to do the people's business and you know you're going to be out of there anyway, than if you're constantly jockeying for re-election every single time. It screws up your motivations. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. I want to do something a little bit different, Oskaloosa. I want to distribute the swamp. Now, what do I mean by that? Why don't we employ hundreds of thousands of workers in the most expensive city in the country? Why wouldn't we move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania? We'd save billions of dollars immediately because everything would be less expensive. And I would argue that those agencies would make better decisions because they'd live someplace normal and they'd talk to normal people and not just talk to each other in this DC bubble. So here are some of the big ways we can actually get our government working for us again, but even more important is that we get this economy working for you and your families again. And there are very limited ways we can make that happen. Raise your hand if you're a parent like me and Evelyn. If you're a parent, you have had a sinking feeling at some point in the last number of days or months that our kids are inheriting a future that is less stable, less secure, and less prosperous than the lives that we have led in the last generation. You know why you feel that way? You know why we feel that way? Because it's true. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance you were going to be better off than your parents were. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we all aspire to leave for our kids. But if you were born in the 1990s in this country, you're down to a 50-50 shot, and it's declining fast. That's why the parents feel the way we do. That's why Trump won Iowa by almost 10 points. Because people don't feel optimistic about the future that we're giving to the next generation. So how do you change that? That's a pretty big challenge. If you're here today and you saw the ads, you know that I want to give every American $1,000 a month. Raise your hand if you saw that. Keep your hand up if you thought it was a gimmick, too good to be true, it will never happen. Oh, I understand. But this is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country. He called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we celebrated on Monday, was fighting for this in 1968. And I know this in part because I sat with his son in Atlanta, who said this is what his father was fighting for when he was killed. 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, endorsed this plan in the 60s. So mainstream, it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. And then 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone who lives in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how does Alaska pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. Raise your hand if you saw that study. Keep your hand up if you got your data check in the mail last month. If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you're not seeing any of it, then where is all of that money going? It's a bit of a mystery. Who's getting all that data money off of our backs? Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, the big tech companies that are paying zero or near zero back into our society. You see how this is working, Oskaloosa? We are getting sucked dry, and the biggest winners are paying virtually nothing back in. So if we get our tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile, we can put $1,000 a month into everyone's hands very, very easily and quickly. Particularly because after the money is in your hands, where would it go? How would you spend it? How much of it would stay right here in Iowa? Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and local nonprofits, and businesses right here in the mall, and religious organizations. This is the trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. Unlike everything else any politician is talking about, this would work. This would give you the chance to look your kids in the eyes and say, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country is going to invest in you. If we don't balance out the economy, we're in the midst of the most extreme winner-take-all economy in the history of the world. There are a limited number of ways you can rebalance it, and there are two parts of it. Number one, how do you get some of that value back from the big companies? And then number two, what do you do with it? I'm arguing that there is nothing better we can do with the value that is leaving your communities than bring it back and give it to you. It is the only way this is going to work. Right now, you're being told how great things are in terms of our economic numbers if you bother to turn on the news. You see record high corporate profits, record high GDP, record low unemployment. But as usual, you look up and say, wait a minute, things do not seem like they're going great for me and the people I know. Corporate profits are at record highs right now in the United States of America. You know what else are at record highs? Stress, anxiety, depression, mental illness, financial insecurity, student loan debt, substance abuse, drug overdoses, suicides, all at record highs. If your corporate profits are going up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you think is more important? What we have to do is line it up so that the things we're measuring actually correspond to how we are doing. And I know how wrong the economic measurements are because of my own family. My wife is at home every day with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our economic measurements right now? Evelyn gets a 0. How about every other stay-at-home parent? How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? 0. Volunteers and activists trying to make communities better and stronger? 0. Coaches and mentors trying to help the next generation? 0. 98% of artists, I hate to say it, but it's true. 0. You know one thing that you don't think about that much, but it's really crucial? How about local journalists? We have put almost 2,000 local newspapers out of business over the last number of months because all their revenue floated up to the cloud. 200 counties in the United States don't have a paper anymore. You know what doesn't function very well if you don't have local news? Democracy. Because how can you vote on what's going on in your town if literally no one is covering what's going on in your town? These are the things that we claim to value most in our country. Our families, our communities, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. In Oskaloosa, what we need you to do on February 3rd is take this statement to the rest of the country, that economic value and human value are not the same things, and that we all have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens of this country, and as human beings ourselves. That's the distinction. I talked to Evelyn about how these ideas, everyone is entitled to a certain amount of our country's resources to meet their basic needs. This was like a mainstream, front and center idea in the 60s and 70s. Again, passed the House of Representatives twice under Nixon. What has happened over the last 50 years that now makes it seem so dramatic that it requires the futurist Asian man to drag it back into the light? Like, what the heck happened to this country over the last 50 years? And what happened over the last 50 years is that we've been collectively conditioned to think that we all work for the economy instead of the economy working for us. That we all work for the machines and the machines don't work for us. And I'm telling you, we've had it backwards. What good is being the richest country in the history of the world if your communities are disintegrating, which is happening right now? So this is the case we can make to the rest of the country, and there's such an appetite for it. That's how an anonymous citizen and parent goes from total anonymity to 4th in the polls in a year. That's how someone comes out of nowhere and beats out half a dozen senators, governors, members of Congress, because this is the message that the American people have been waiting for. But this message will not reach the rest of the country unless you take it to them on February 3rd. We need you to caucus for this campaign on February 3rd to make sure this message does not die here in Iowa. Instead of pretending that the corporate profits are the same as our well-being, we should measure our economic progress by things like our health and life expectancy, the proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, clean air and clean water, childhood success rates. As your president, I will modernize our economic measurements to these measures that tell us how you are doing. And then I will present them to you every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in the State of the Union. And if you like that idea, then this is definitely your campaign. Donald Trump is our president today because he had a very simple message. It convinced many of your neighbors, some of you I know. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. You remember this? It's been a long 3 years, I know. but it's now coming to an end. That response did not go over well with many Americans because the problems are real. We have to acknowledge their depth and severity, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our communities and our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Oskaloosa, we have to do the opposite. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of this era, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I'm the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Oskaloosa. You may not know this, but math is an acronym. What does it stand for? Make America Think Harder. That's right. It's your job to do just that on February 3rd and move this country we love so much, not left, not right, but forward on February 3rd. And I know that's just where you'll take us. Thank you, Oskaloosa. I think this is my first speech at a mall, but certainly not the last. I think we have a mic and sometimes some questions. If anyone has some something on their mind, I'm sure you do. Where's my mic runner? There you are.
Hi.
Just raise your hand. The mic. We got a question in the back.
What is your position on the government funding Planned Parenthood?
I believe that women's reproductive rights are fundamental human rights, and the government should not be intervening with a woman's decision over what to do with their own body. And I think there's one thing saying like, hey, we should allow people to do that, but it's not truly free if, for example, there's like a poor woman who wants reproductive services and doesn't have the resources to access them. So I believe that if you want to have women have the ability to access these rights, you need to make sure that it's available in a realistic way. I will say that people have come to me and said, I disagree with you, that they're pro-life, but they said that they will still support my campaign because this $1,000 a month for each of us, they said is the most pro-life policy that they've ever seen, because it would make it so that many more expectant mothers would actually be able to bring kids into the world. Since many of the women who terminate their pregnancy are doing so because of economic need and desperation. And so if we had a society where some of our vast wealth was actually going to moms, then you would have more women making different decisions.
What is your position on the chaplains having the freedom when they meet with the military to be able to pray in the name of Jesus and to read a Bible to them?
I think that chaplains should have that freedom.
And what is your position on America supporting Israel?
I think America's had a very deep and long-standing relationship with Israel that, to me, transcends even individual administrations. I do believe that the historical stance of the U.S. government, that a two-state solution is the best path forward, is the stance that we should have and continue to have, and that's the stance I would take as president. But the U.S.-Israel relationship is historic for so many reasons that relationship will stand the test of time regardless of their individual administrations that push in a particular direction.
Okay, hello. I have one question for you. I'm a really big fan of the universal basic income, but I would like to know, like, for people in my generation and younger, when they reach 18, how are they going to know what to do with this $1,000? Like, what can we do to educate them before, you know?
I love this question so much. What's your name? Thank you. I believe we should be teaching financial literacy to all Americans in high school. But one thing I've learned over the years, it's almost impossible to teach financial literacy effectively to someone who does not have money. It's true. Like, it all just becomes very, very abstract. So if at age 18 you're getting $1,000 a month because your country is investing in you, then before you get that money, you take a financial literacy class so that you have a sense as to what to do with it. And then I would also say, and this is somewhat unrelated, your senior spring in high school, we should send you, if you want, to another part of the country to live and work for a month, the American Exchange Program, just to get exposure to what's going on in another community, in other parts of the country. Because the fact is you don't learn that much senior spring anyway, so we might as well put you in a position where you'll actually get some exposure and learn some things. But I'm for financial literacy in every high school for every citizen before they get the dividend. And obviously there are many of us who are already out of high school, so we should have financial literacy programs being offered free of charge essentially to all Americans in conjunction with this dividend. I would also make it so that the dividend cannot be lent or borrowed against. It's unenforceable, because financial companies would try and pull a fast one, be like, hey, how would you like, prepayments on your dividends for for the low interest rate of 25% or whatever. But yeah, a big piece of the puzzle is equipping people with the knowledge and familiarity with financial concepts so they would know what to do. I would say, too, though, that in my belief, people are the best situated to figure out how best to use resources. Like, you're going to know better how to spend money to improve your life than I am. And we have to trust people in that way. These big companies like Verizon or Microsoft, when they give dividends to their shareholders, do they ever follow up with the shareholder and say, hey, how are you going to spend that money? Like, no one ever thinks like that. We have to think about this as this is our country, and if you get your tiny, tiny share of our unprecedented prosperity, then we have to believe in you to know what to do with it. But I would 100% offer financial literacy because those principles are very important.
I believe there are two trends that have created the problems in the economy that we have currently that have happened over the last, 50 years. One is the concentration of population in urban areas. The other is a concentration of wealth that's resulted from it. Do you agree with that? And would you have anything in the way of a idea that we could possibly mitigate that or reverse it? And do you think possibly that the tax system might be a mechanism to do that?
Well, I love this question. If you didn't hear, thank you. What's your name, sir? What's your name?
Gary Capps.
Gary? So what Gary is saying is, hey, one of the mega trends has been all this concentration of wealth and activity in urban areas, and how can you reverse that? And that has been one aspect of what's gone on in our economy, where urban areas, actually not even all urban areas, like a relatively small collection of urban areas have absorbed a lot of the economic growth. And that's not great for the country on several levels. I'm going to take it to another place for just a moment. This is one reason why our founders set up the Electoral College the way they did, so that rural areas would have a say in our country's future. Because if you did it strictly by population, it would all go to the urban areas. You know what I mean? Like, presidential candidates like me would just be hanging out in New York City and like major media markets because just trying to reach people. This is one reason why I think abolishing the Electoral College is a really poor idea. So to me, this is a situation where we have to rebalance the economy in various ways. And rebalancing it between urban and rural areas is one of the most important things we can do. Now, there are various mechanisms you can use. To me, the most effective mechanism is, instead of looking at it geographically, is look at it by population. And that's one reason why I just want to put money into your hands, knowing that $1,000 a month in a rural area actually goes further than it does in one of the major metropolitan areas. Some people have said to me, hey, why don't you actually like scale the benefits based upon where someone lives? And I'm like, no, just make it the same thing. And then if you're in a rural area, it has a bigger impact. If you're in an urban area, it has a smaller impact. And that's fair to me. So this is one big way that we can balance it out. There are other things we can do that, in my opinion, are more marginal. And I don't know if this is an issue here in Oskaloosa, but we should get 99.9% of households high-speed broadband if you want it. And the reason why it hasn't been wired to rural areas is just the companies didn't think they could make money wiring the last 30, 40 miles. And so that's something where the government should just be like, you're going to make your money back. It just might take you a little bit longer. We'll cover the difference. So to me, this urban-rural gap is one of the biggest problems in our country today. And it's dividing us politically, it's dividing us economically, it's dividing us culturally. I want to balance that out. It's one of my primary missions as your president. I think there's a question up here, right? There, yeah.
Hi. What is your stance on medicinal cannabis?
The question, what's your name?
Sabrina.
Sabrina is asking about medicinal cannabis. I'm for the full legalization of marijuana at the federal level. It should just be like not a controlled substance anymore. And I say this in part because, one, I've talked to hundreds, thousands of Americans who use marijuana to manage pain and other conditions. And number two, marijuana is clearly less dangerous and lethal than this opiate, the prescription opiates that have been killing tens of thousands of Americans for years now. So if you have a choice, you make marijuana legal. I'm also for decriminalizing opiate use if you're not dealing, if you're just an addict who is struggling. We should not be putting you in a jail cell. We should be putting you towards counseling and treatment. And one reason I know this is the right thing to do is that the government turned a blind eye to Purdue Pharma dispensing millions of OxyContin prescriptions that got our people addicted in the first place. So if the government screws up at that mammoth a scale, then the government can't then go and say, what, you're addicted? Like, it's on you. I mean, this is definitely a collective failure on the part of government. And it's criminal to me how families and companies got rich off the lives and health of our fellow Americans. Purdue Pharma, this is really just how messed up things have gone, but Purdue Pharma dispensed so many OxyContin prescriptions that at one point there were more prescriptions in the state of Ohio than there were human beings in the state of Ohio. Think about that for a sec. And the government somehow thought that was appropriate. Eventually, our government fined Purdue Pharma $635 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize Purdue Pharma made $30 billion, so they got a 2% fine on initiating this plague that has, I know, taken members of your community and even family. And that's blood money. We should take it all back, and then we should put it into our community's hands. You can't restore people's sons, loved ones, health, years of their lives, but you have to at least give more people a fighting chance, and money should not be the obstacle. And our legal system should not be the obstacle either. We have to actually invest our resources in making people stronger and healthier and not being punitive towards addiction that people are struggling with.
All right.
So this $1,000 a month thing that you're planning, can I ask where you're planning on getting this money to give to everybody?
Sure, of course. So if you take a toll on the Amazons, Facebooks, Googles, Ubers, Microsofts, et cetera, it generates $800 billion to $1 trillion a year with a giant up arrow attached to it. Because when you have robot trucks that drive themselves, how much of that value will we see right now in our current tax code? None. Because who's going to own the self-driving truck equipment and software? A $1 trillion tech company that pays zero in taxes. So that's what you have to change. You have to make it so that we're actually getting a fraction of that value. If you succeed in that, then we generate hundreds of billions of dollars and rising all the time. The second thing is you put this money into your hands. The money doesn't disappear. You spend it right here in your community, and then it circulates several times. It creates hundreds of billions of dollars in new tax revenue that we get back because of the economic activity and growth. You all know, in a country where 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck and almost half can't afford an unexpected $500 bill, you put money into that person's hands, you know it's going to get spent. You know it's going to be economic driver. If you snuck into Jeff Bezos' bank account and gave him an extra $1,000 a month, what effect would it have on the economy? Literally zero. He would not even notice. You would change one digit in one account and it would have no impact on the economy. So money in our hands boosts the economy in a very, very real way. The third thing is a corrections officer said to me, we should pay people to stay out of jail because we spend so much when they're in jail. If you put this $1,000 a month into people's hands, will we be spending less on incarceration, emergency room health care, shelters and homelessness services that we spend over $1 trillion on right now? Yeah, you'd save billions on that. And then the fourth thing is that you put this money into our hands, it makes us stronger, healthier, mentally healthier. Our kids graduate from high school at higher levels. One study said that this move would increase our GDP by $700 billion a year just based on our people being healthier and better educated. And none of this is taking into account the fact that every community would have more people starting businesses, doing things that are positive for each of us, taking a little bit more of a risk because you know you have this cushion you can fall back on. So this trickle-up economy ends up paying for itself in part, but the big move you have to make is harnessing the gains from the Amazons, Googles, and the mega winners of this economy, because right now we're not getting any of that value back.
All right, we're going to do one last question.
Man in the Beatles shirt. I like his taste in music.
Thanks. I just had a question about health care. Like you hear Sanders and Warren Medicare for all.
Yes.
Then you hear Buttigieg Medicare for those who want it and keep your private insurance. Then you hear Biden, let's expand on Obamacare, which the premiums are so high for the middle class that a lot of people would rather just pay the fine than get the insurance. So what's your views on the healthcare system?
Thank you for the question. I know others have the same question. I'm for universal health care as a right of citizenship in this country. But I would not get rid of private health insurance because millions of Americans enjoy their plans. Some negotiated away various wages for those plans. So to me, it has to be on the government to demonstrate that the government plan works and is high quality and lower priced. And if we succeed at that, then Americans will vote with their feet. We'll say, wait a minute, like that's better than what I'm getting now. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is because so many Americans are locked into place by our current health insurance system. How many people have thought about starting a business, but then like, wait, what am I going to do about healthcare? Like if you think about it economy-wide, that's millions of people. How many people are doing a job that they kind of wanted to leave, but they're like, well, I can't because of the healthcare? The fact that healthcare is linked to our employment is totally an historical accident. It happened in World War II where we had pay caps throughout the economy because it was the war. And then companies said, well, how am I going to compensate you more? I'm going to give you health insurance. So they ended up tacking health insurance on top of their jobs, and then we ended up with this overgrown, strange bureaucracy as a result. So we need to disentangle that. We need to give Americans health care in a way that's high quality and low cost. And I am 100% convinced we can do it because I'm the numbers guy. I've looked at our healthcare expenditures. We spend $3.6 trillion a year right now to worse results than other countries. About 30% of that $3.6 trillion is waste. And where is that waste going? Into the pockets of the drug companies, the private insurers, and the device manufacturers. Our healthcare system is not designed to make us stronger and healthier right now. What's it designed for?
Profit.
Maximal profit and revenue for those sets of companies. So if you rationalize costs, you can get the access up and the cost down very, very quickly. There are so many things we can do in the healthcare space if we actually take some of the vast resources that are not actually making us stronger and healthier and redeploy them in more effective ways. But I'm for universal healthcare. If you're an American, you should be able to walk into a hospital and just know that you're going to be taken care of and not get stuck with a $10,000, $20,000 bill on the way out. On a personal level, my parents have been essentially semi-retired in Asia over the last number of years. So I grew up in upstate New York, and then my mom went back to take care of her mom, who just passed away last month. But my mom's been using the healthcare system in Asia, and she's like, what is going on with how great and easy this is? She just like walks in, they treat her, they ask her for like $10 on the way out, and she's like, that's it? And they're like, yes. And so she used to think about having to come here and trying to figure out her health care here in the States. And now she's like, I'm not sure I need to do that because I just sort of like go and and this country I'm describing, Taiwan, has only a very small fraction of the resources that the United States of America has. We're accepting some very, very strange things in our healthcare system right now that other parts of the world have figured out. And we need to figure it out too. I'll figure it out as your president. Thank you, Oskaloosa. Let's make history together and win this thing. And actually deliver a future we're excited about for our kids. That's what this election's about. This election's about you and your families. We're going to deliver some real changes right here in Oskaloosa. Thank you.
Let's give one more round of applause for Andrew Yang.